On March 29, 2008, the building manager of the Edificio London apartment in North Sao Paulo, Brazil, made a distressing emergency call that sent shockwaves through the community. The police swiftly responded to the call and arrived at the scene to find Isabella Nardoni, a young girl who was about to turn 6, struggling to breathe in the apartment garden. Her father, Alexandra Nardoni, claimed that Isabella had been left alone in the apartment while he and his wife, Anna Jatoba, briefly stepped out to attend to their other children. However, upon their return, Isabella had inexplicably vanished. This tragic incident marked a turning point in the lives of Isabella's family. Isabella's journey began on April 18, 2002, when she was born, bringing immeasurable joy to her parents, Alexandra Nardoni and Carolina Oliveira. They eagerly awaited her arrival, envisioning a future filled with love and happiness. However, fate had other plans in store for them. Isabella spent weekdays with her mother, Carolina, and weekends with her father and stepmother. Although it was difficult for Carolina to let her go, she found solace in knowing that Isabella was content. Isabella not only shared a deep bond with her stepbrothers, Pietro and Kawa, but also with her cousin Giovanna Oliveira. Their family connection was beautiful and strong, but it was about to face an unimaginable tragedy. March 29, 2008, was the fateful Saturday that would forever haunt Isabella's family. It was only the second day of Isabella's weekend with her father, and everything seemed ordinary, with their daily routines unfolding as usual. However, at approximately 10:20 p.m., the Edificio London apartment in North Sao Paulo, where Alexandra Nardoni and Anna Jatoba lived, transformed into a nightmarish scene. Amidst the chaos, the crucial first step was to call for help, despite all eyes being on the doorman. Before the arrival of any family members or law enforcement, the occupants of the building gathered around Isabella. The distress was compounded by the sight of Isabella enduring excruciating pain following her fall from the 6th floor. Shortly thereafter, a large number of police officers arrived at the scene. Isabella's mother, Carolina, could only offer prayers and hope for her daughter's well-being. As Isabella's breaths grew weaker and weaker during her transportation in the ambulance, Carolina desperately clung to her faith, holding on to hope. In a short period of time, they arrived at the hospital. However, everyone's hopes were about to be shattered. It was Carolina's final opportunity to bid farewell to her beloved daughter. According to the initial response from the doctors, Isabella had passed away due to cardiac arrest. While Isabella's mother, grandmother, and grandfather were at the hospital, Isabella's father, Alexandra Nardoni, and her stepmother, Anna Jatoba, were being questioned by the police. The police persistently inquired whether they had any enemies who may have acted out of ill will or revenge. The doorman, who was wearing a black shirt on the night of the incident, was the only individual who aligned with the couple's allegations. Was he truly the culprit? If not, what was his role during the incident? The doorman's statement appeared to be quite ordinary, exactly what one would expect in such a situation. However, it was too early to completely dismiss suspicion. The police needed more clues, a significant amount of them. Therefore, it was time to thoroughly examine the apartment. At this stage, many details were being kept confidential, and the investigation had not yet fully commenced. While the possibility of it being an accident still remained, Alexandra's claims of a break-in did not align seamlessly with the crime scene. Clearly, there were potential inconsistencies, and with no one else present in the apartment except for Alexandra and Jatoba, finding another suspect out of thin air was proving to be a challenge. Additionally, accusing a father of committing the murder of his own daughter was not only distressing, but also inappropriate without concrete evidence. Another significant detail to note was the unusual nature of the window from which Isabella fell, or was possibly thrown. The wire net that blocked the window had been intentionally cut, ruling out the possibility of the incident being accidental. As the case remained a perplexing mystery, Isabella's family was left shattered. The unimaginable pain caused by the loss of their daughter seemed insurmountable, and no amount of justice could ever be enough. However, the curse of not knowing what truly happened to their innocent little girl weighed heavily on their hearts. Furthermore, a case of this magnitude was bound to attract attention. Every time Isabella's birth mother, Carolina, stepped outside, she found herself surrounded by reporters, leaving her no time to grieve. It was now the responsibility of the police to uncover answers for the family, the community, and the entire nation. In this situation, the forensic department understood the crucial role they had to play. Moreover, they gradually discovered more clues that indicated something was deeply wrong with the case. Armed with this information, the police sought validation from the coroner regarding the theory that Isabella had sustained injuries prior to the fall. The answer they received would alter the course of the investigation. It became evident that Isabella had suffered significant injuries before her fall, challenging the initial cause of death listed as cardiac arrest. Determined to uncover the truth, the police knew that an autopsy was necessary. From this point onward, suspicions began to focus on Alexandre. His distress was apparent, but the question remained: were his words truthful, or was there a hidden layer to the story? The police redirected their attention towards Jatoba in order to obtain her perspective on the situation. This raised suspicions even further. The main question that lingered was whether or not they were responsible for Isabella's death. However, due to their unusual reactions during the investigation, the police realized that they needed to dig deeper into their lives instead of solely focusing on a potential intruder. The couple's behavior was peculiar and stood in stark contrast to the Oliveira family, who seemed solely concerned about Isabella's well-being rather than themselves. Alexandra and Jatoba appeared to have premeditated plans for their own safety. The case of Isabella Nardoni became a magnet for media attention and public outrage. The press, in their typical fashion, turned the event into a national frenzy. The unfolding tragedy captivated television programs, newspapers, and the general public. More and more people took to the streets, demanding justice for the young girl and directing their anger towards her parents. The public was furious and desperate for answers. At that moment, it seemed as though they already knew the truth, but there was still no concrete evidence to prove that the couple was responsible for this heinous incident. Accusing the family of such a crime was a delicate matter, but the investigation was yielding results, and soon enough, the couple found themselves in handcuffs. The police found themselves navigating through uncharted territory, facing a level of controversy they had never encountered before. The Isabella case had become deeply personal for the general public, and every step of the investigation carried immense risks and fragility. Immediately after the arrest, the media made yet another significant move, causing chaos not only in the city but throughout the entire country. There was now no possible way for this case to remain unsolved. It had become a topic on everyone's lips, a narrative that evoked frustration, sadness, and a web of lies that desperately needed to be unraveled. The only footage of the family before the tragic event was aired nationwide for the first time, igniting a fire in people's hearts and prompting them to demand justice for Isabella. The public was in a frenzy, with banners and screens displaying a unified message. In the midst of the chaos, a new piece of information emerged, a revelation that once again shifted the direction of the case. Could this be the breakthrough in solving the mystery of Isabella Nardoni? It was revealed that there was someone present on the night of the incident. However, internal police issues disrupted the investigation, involving the individual with crucial information about the break-in. Suddenly, his stance changed. The situation took a darker turn after 2 weeks. The judge stated that mere suspicion was not enough to keep individuals in custody, yet more unsettling details emerged shortly after. On April 18, 2008, Alexandra and Jatoba were called in for questioning. The timing seemed coincidental, but the police had their own agenda. Despite being interrogated for 20 hours, neither of them admitted to anything. Both Jatoba's father and Alexandra's father remained confident that they would soon be cleared of any wrongdoing. Alexandra's father, Antonio Nardoni, was a prominent defense attorney specializing in tax law. Speculations arose about whether their influence could help them navigate through this national tragedy. With his father's support, Alexandra felt a sense of power. As the police delved into Alexandra's background, they uncovered various details indirectly linked to the case. His relationship with Carolina Oliveira and her family was not as positive as it initially seemed. However, Antonio Nardoni, as a father, never hesitated to defend his spoiled son. It soon became clear that Antonio was seeking attention and was willing to do anything to change people's opinions, but unfortunately it didn't work. In fact, it had the opposite effect. There were speculations at the time that Jatoba might not have been truly involved if Alexandra was truly the perpetrator. While it is not confirmed, the evidence suggests that Jatoba was indeed suffering from depression. However, being depressed does not necessarily mean being innocent. Although it was difficult to fully understand the mindset of Alexandra or Jatoba, the crime scene provided some insight into their actions. The forensic analysis clearly indicated that Isabella had been carried inside and had sustained injuries before entering the apartment. This led to a completely different theory when examining Isabella's room. Once again, Alexandra and Jatoba found themselves at the center of this heinous crime. The investigation then proceeded with the use of dummies to reconstruct the crime. The media seized the opportunity to cover one of the nation's biggest controversies, and thus the work began. The evaluation of the timeline of that fateful day became crucial. While Alexandra was in the garden, the whereabouts of Jatoba remained unknown. Once again, Alexandra and Jatoba were handcuffed amidst a chaotic crowd. The couple was eventually taken to the police station. What was interesting was that the arresting officers knew how to calm the public. Typically, police cars have a black cover on their back window, but it was removed when the couple was being transported. The couple seemed to intentionally showcase themselves to the world through the car's rear window. However, the police didn't stop there. Their goal was to bring a sense of relief to the public, who were the backbone of the nation. The public had finally started to feel satisfied, and their desire for justice could only be satisfied through its pursuit. While the couple's arrest brought relief to the public, the media took it a step further. Here's what they did. At that time, the couple was still presumed innocent until proven guilty, and they were fighting for their lives. However, attorney Francisco Cembranelli was gradually becoming a hero on a national level. And truth be told, Cembranelli was prepared to face the trials at any time. After an exhaustive 2-year investigation, the murder case of Isabella Nardoni finally went to trial in March 2010, capturing immense national attention. A jury of 7 members was chosen to evaluate the evidence and deliver a verdict. The scene resembled a FIFA World Cup final, with the streets filled with people. However, the case was far from over. The defendants had a trick up their sleeves. The backgrounds of the 2 attorneys, Cembranelli and Podval, the defense attorney, were noteworthy. Podval was ready, and by ready, it meant he understood that he was in for a tough battle and was determined to win it nonetheless. One was seen as a hero, while the other was seen as a villain. The trial began with both the crowd and the nation holding on to the collective belief that justice would ultimately prevail. Undoubtedly, it was a challenging fight for Podval, as in the court of public opinion, the couple had already been deemed guilty. Throughout the trial, crucial testimonies were revealed. Isabella's mother, Carolina, took the stand first and disclosed that Jatoba had been extremely jealous of her. She recounted an incident when Alexandra had threatened to harm her and her mother when confronted about late alimony payments. Carolina further revealed that Jatoba had contacted her on the night of Isabella's tragic death, placing the blame on Isabella herself. Carolina was overwhelmed with emotions, knowing that she would never be able to share precious moments with her daughter. On the other hand, Alexandra displayed visible emotions during his testimony, expressing the deep sorrow caused by the loss of his daughter. Alexandra denied seeing any third person in the apartment on the day of Isabella's death, refuting claims of a break-in. A startling moment occurred when defense attorney Francisco Sembranelli began cross-examining Alexandra. The prosecution questioned why Alexandra didn't assist his daughter. Alexandra explained that he had checked to see if she was alive, but couldn't provide a clear explanation as to why he didn't help her when she was indeed alive. Sembranelli persisted in seeking an answer, and Alexandra stated that he was in a state of shock and unable to provide further details. This left the prosecutor and jurors puzzled, questioning how a father could fail to act after witnessing his daughter's fall. Alexandra also struggled to explain why he hadn't spoken to his partner, Ana Oliveira, following their daughter's death. When asked about it, Alexandra simply stated that it was an embarrassing situation. The case was rapidly slipping out of the defendant's control, but Alexandra and Jatoba had to continue their fight to prove that it wasn't over yet. A 3D animated video illustrating the supposed sequence of events leading to the crime was created. The animated video at the end failed to make an impact. The prosecution meticulously pointed out numerous flaws in the video. The bloodstain found in Isabella's room was inconclusive, as reports indicated it couldn't be directly linked to Isabella. Despite unanswered questions about who killed her and who hit her, many hypotheses remained undisclosed. Even today, it cannot definitively be stated. Throughout the trial, various hypotheses emerged, but one fact remained constant. The couple couldn't be removed from the crime scene at the time of the fall. After a 5-day trial, on March 27, 2010, the verdict was delivered in a way that satisfied the waiting crowd. The judge explicitly stated that Jatoba had hit the girl on the head with a blunt object and strangled her, while Alexandra had thrown her out of the window, leading to her death. They were found guilty, and the sentence was announced. Following their arrest and sentencing, people gathered outside the Santana Forum in the north of Sao Paulo, with intense reactions ranging from celebration to setting off fireworks.
It turned me into a monster, and I don't like who I became. The world is going to hate me now, and she never had a chance to grow up, never had a chance to experience anything, and I took that away from her, and there's nothing I can do to bring her back.
Tell us what happened.
I was so high, and I was so out of my mind, and it was like I was out of character, and I got what I got coming, and I deserve it. I will write a formal apology to her family that they probably don't want to hear, but I will do it anyway. I don't want a circus made out of this. I just want to go to court and get it over with.
Aliana DeFries, a 14-year-old girl, was tragically murdered on January 26, 2017. That fateful morning, she left her home to catch one of 2 buses to school, but she never made it back. Concerned, her mother contacted the school only to discover that Aliana had not shown up that day. 3 days later, her lifeless body was discovered in an abandoned house, just 2 blocks away from her usual bus stop. Through DNA evidence and surveillance footage, investigators swiftly identified a suspect. The murder of Aliana DeFries may seem like a senseless act of violence against a young teenager, but beneath the surface lies a series of systemic failures. These failures not only allowed a dangerous criminal to roam free, but also exposed the vulnerabilities faced by young black girls like Aliana. Born on June 12, 2002 in Detroit, Michigan, Aliana split her time between her parents' homes in Cleveland, Ohio, after they separated when she was young. Described as a cheerful and innocent child, Aliana continued to enjoy playing with dolls and stuffed animals even as she entered her teenage years. A student at E-Prep in Cleveland, she was in her 2nd year at the charter school and had a passion for learning. Despite facing developmental challenges and receiving special education services, Aliana rarely missed a day of school. Living far from the school, she relied on public transportation to commute, highlighting the obstacles she had to overcome in pursuit of her education. Her parents were extremely cautious when it came to their daughter's safety, and they strongly disapproved of her taking the bus to school. Whenever possible, either her father or stepmother would pick her up in the afternoon, but for the most part, she relied on public transportation. Aliana had to take 2 buses to get to school, and the only solace her mother, Danesha, found in her daughter's commute was that the second bus stop was conveniently located across the street from the 4th District Police Station. Aliana's grandmother informed Fox 8 that she would regularly text with Aliana to check in and find out which bus she was on. Despite not being the ideal situation for her parents, Aliana had grown accustomed to taking the bus and knew to go directly to school and return home promptly. Since starting at E-Prep, Aliana had successfully navigated her way to and from school without any issues. January 26, 2017, began like any other day for Aliana and her mother. Aliana had a tutoring session before class that required her to be at school by 7 a.m. As part of their routine, Danesha would accompany Aliana to the bus stop and wait until the bus arrived. On that particular morning, Danesha mentioned that they were in a hurry to catch the bus. Just before Aliana boarded the bus, she turned back to give her mother a kiss and bid her farewell. Little did Danesha know that it would be the last time she would see her daughter. That afternoon, Danesha anxiously awaited Aliana's return from school, as she always did. Although the exact time Aliana typically arrived home could not be determined, based on the day's schedule, it was assumed she would be home sometime after 3 p.m. However, on that day, Aliana did not come home at the expected time, causing immediate concern for her mother. Reports indicated that Aliana had a cell phone, but all calls were going straight to voicemail. Danesha, knowing her daughter well, grew increasingly worried. Aliana's stepmother recounted receiving a phone call from Danesha that afternoon, inquiring if they had picked up Aliana from school, but they had not. After conversing with her stepmother and father and learning that Aliana had not been picked up, Danesha's next call was to E-Prep, hoping to find out if Aliana was still at school or if she had left later than usual. However, Danesha was taken aback by what she was told when she spoke to her daughter's school. Aliana had never arrived that morning. By the time Danesha received this information, it had been almost 9 hours since she had last seen her daughter. An entire day had passed without her knowledge that Aliana was absent from school. As Danesha hung up the phone, panic began to consume her as she realized that Aliana was missing, and she had no clue of her whereabouts. At approximately 4:15 p.m., Danesha reached out to the Cleveland Police Department to report her daughter as missing. Upon receiving the report, the police contacted E-Prep to verify Aliana's absence from school and gather more details about the 14-year-old. Time and time again, the initial assumption in cases like this is that the child has run away. The police were determined to investigate Aliana's disappearance in order to understand the nature of the case. However, after speaking with Danesha and the staff at E-Prep, it became evident that this was not typical behavior for Aliana. She had never exhibited such behavior before. Consequently, the police initiated a search for Aliana in the vicinity of her school, focusing on local hangout spots frequented by teenagers. Those close to Aliana had informed the police that she was naive and susceptible to being coerced or influenced by others. Initially, the police hoped that she had simply been peer-pressured into skipping school and was somewhere socializing. However, despite hours of searching and visiting various known hangouts for teens, there was no trace of Aliana. As time passed, Aliana's parents grew increasingly concerned that something terrible had happened to their daughter. Although she could be naive, they were confident that she understood the rules and would not have gone anywhere she wasn't supposed to. Their intuition told them that something had indeed befallen their daughter, confirming their worst fears. In the hours following Aliana's disappearance, the police, along with her family and friends, scoured the route she would have taken to school that day. They knew she had boarded the first bus as her mother had witnessed it, but they were uncertain if she had boarded the second bus and where she had gone after disembarking. Aware of the presence of surveillance cameras on the buses, the police contacted the Transportation Authority to obtain footage from the buses Aliana would have traveled on. Meanwhile, as the search for her daughter continued, Donatia began questioning E-Prep's failure to communicate her daughter's absence. She had not received any notification about Aliana's non-attendance, and had she not taken the initiative to call, she would have remained unaware. Donatia had enrolled in the school alert system to receive notifications about Aliana's absence. However, the school claimed that there was a malfunction in the system, which resulted in Donatia not receiving any calls. Unfortunately, this failure to notify Donatia caused a significant delay before the police were informed, resulting in critical hours being lost. As the search for Aliana continued, the police obtained surveillance footage from a neighbor living near the bus stop where Aliana would disembark to catch her second bus. The footage showed Aliana getting off the bus, but there was no evidence of her boarding the second bus. The police interviewed multiple witnesses in the area who claimed to have seen Aliana. One person reported seeing her at McDonald's near her school in the morning, accompanied by another girl. Another sighting came from a bus driver who informed the school principal that he saw Aliana getting off his bus at around 3:30 p.m. However, neither of these sightings could be confirmed. The urgency to locate Aliana grew as they believed she was in danger, especially considering her asthma condition that required daily medication. Time was not on their side. Despite extensive searches and speaking to numerous individuals, the police were unable to find any trace of the 14-year-old in the hours following her disappearance. Flyers were distributed throughout the area, and the community became increasingly concerned as news of her disappearance spread. Unfortunately, Cleveland has experienced numerous cases of young black women and girls going missing, leading to a sense of fear among those familiar with these stories. They worried that Aliana may have met a similar fate. On Sunday, January 29, 2017, 3 days after Aliana's disappearance, the police initiated an intensive search, focusing on abandoned properties near the location where she was last seen getting off the bus. At approximately 7 p.m., 3 officers conducting the search noticed an abandoned property on Fuller Avenue. The open back door of the building immediately caught their attention, prompting them to enter. Inside, they were confronted with a chilling sight: bloody footprints on the floors, walls smeared and spattered with blood. Following the trail of blood, the officers discovered a room containing a bag of tools stained with blood, as well as torn clothing. Despite the darkness, the police relied on their flashlights to navigate through the house, realizing that something dreadful had occurred within its walls. Continuing their search, they reached a locked room, which they forcefully entered. To their horror, they found a lifeless body huddled in the corner. Initially, the police were unable to positively identify the body, but they strongly suspected it to be Aliana. Once detectives arrived to process the evidence, it became evident that a truly horrific event had taken place in that home. The investigators recognized that this was not a typical homicide, but the work of a monstrous individual. As the details of the investigation unfolded, the events that transpired inside that abandoned home would shock the conscience of nearly everyone in Cleveland. Among the items recovered at the scene were several articles of clothing matching Aliana's description, as well as her backpack. All signs pointed towards the body being Aliana's, but the task now was to determine what had happened to her and who was responsible. The body exhibited clear signs of severe trauma, including bruises and cuts. In the dining room area, the police discovered various bloody tools, leading them to believe that these instruments had been used in the murder. Following an autopsy conducted by the medical examiner, it was confirmed that the body indeed belonged to Aliana DeFries. The autopsy further revealed the horrifying details of her final hours. The medical examiner determined that Aliana had been subjected to sexual assault, physical assault, and stabbing. The perpetrator utilized various tools such as a box cutter, a screwdriver, and a drill. The severity of the injuries inflicted on Aliana's body was so extreme that the cause of death could not be identified. It was evident that she had endured hours of torture prior to her murder, as some of her wounds had already started to heal. Fortunately, the police were able to swiftly identify the individual responsible. Although the surveillance footage from the bus that Aliana had been on did not provide any leads after she disembarked, the discovery of her body prompted investigators to revisit the area and search for potential camera footage from nearby businesses. Their hope was to find evidence of Aliana with either the suspect or someone who could lead them to the suspect. After visiting multiple establishments, the investigators turned their attention to a church located a few blocks away from where Aliana's body was found. The church had surveillance cameras outside, and the investigators requested copies of the footage from the day Aliana was last seen. Although the quality of the footage was not optimal, it did capture Aliana walking into the camera's view. As she approached the corner, a man was seen standing there. It appeared from the footage that he said something to Aliana, causing her to step back before they both went out of frame. Fortunately, the church had a second camera in the parking lot, which provided another angle of the corner. Although the full image of the individuals was not visible, the investigators could observe Aliana's legs along with the presence of the man on the corner. After the man utters something to her, and she takes a step back, the video then depicts both individuals walking in the same direction, with the man trailing behind Aliana. It becomes evident that he seizes her as they head towards the deserted house where Aliana was eventually discovered. Despite the grainy quality of the footage, it is discernible that the larger person in the video is directing the smaller one towards the abandoned house. The video footage was truly shocking, leaving investigators with the belief that they had witnessed Aliana's abduction unfold before their eyes. Now, their focus shifted towards identifying the man captured in the footage. To gain a better perspective, the investigators decided to rewind the footage to before Aliana disembarked from the bus. They observed the camera from the initial angle positioned outside the church, and to their surprise, they spotted a man strolling down the street in front of the church earlier that morning. He momentarily exits the camera's view and then reappears, walking in the opposite direction. His leisurely pace suggests he is searching for someone. The footage now provides them with enough details to potentially narrow down their suspect. The investigators made the decision to begin their search among individuals already known to the police, specifically men with a history of similar behavior. They meticulously examined numerous photographs, hoping to find a resemblance to the man captured in the video. After scrutinizing several potential suspects, the detectives identified one individual whom they believed to be a match: Christopher Whitaker. Whitaker, a registered sex offender, had previously been convicted in 2005 for assaulting and stabbing a young woman, serving only 4 years in prison for his crimes. Upon comparing his photograph to the images from the surveillance footage, the investigators were unequivocally certain that Whitaker was the person they had witnessed in those videos. Once the DNA results were obtained, they confirmed that the DNA found on Aliana's body indeed belonged to Christopher Whitaker. 4 days after Aliana's discovery, U.S. Marshals apprehended Christopher Whitaker at a residence in Mayfield Heights. During the interrogation following his arrest, Whitaker initially denied any involvement in Aliana's murder. He mentioned visiting the abandoned house a few days prior to her death to collect scrap metal with another individual. However, as detectives persisted in questioning him, Whitaker altered his story multiple times. Eventually, he confessed to smoking crack and even admitted to being present during Aliana's killing, though he shifted blame onto someone else. After a prolonged interrogation and numerous changes in his narrative, Whitaker finally confessed to the murder, attributing his actions to his crack cocaine use. He described the moment of the crime as a blur, claiming he felt like he almost blacked out. Despite expressing remorse and stating that he did not recall the specifics of the incident, Whitaker acknowledged his disgust with himself. Following his confession, detectives had substantial evidence to charge Christopher Whitaker, solidifying their case against him. The community breathed a collective sigh of relief upon Whitaker's arrest. Cases like Aliana's often remain unsolved for long periods of time, if not indefinitely. Therefore, the swift arrest made by the police was met with gratitude from the community. However, for Aliana's family, it was a bittersweet moment. They were relieved that the individual responsible for their daughter's murder was apprehended, but it did not change the tragic events that had already occurred. In February 2018, Christopher Whitaker's trial commenced, with the district attorney seeking the death penalty. The prosecution presented a strong case, supported by DNA evidence, Whitaker's confession, and the testimony of witnesses who came forward. All of these factors pointed to Whitaker as the perpetrator. The defense attempted to argue that Whitaker's crack cocaine use impaired his ability to make sound decisions. While they did not deny his involvement, as he had confessed, they aimed to convince the jurors that his confession was influenced by drugs, and therefore he should not be sentenced to death. However, the jury rejected this argument. On February 13, 2018, Christopher Whitaker was found guilty on 10 separate counts, and 10 days later, he was sentenced to death. In December 2018, after persistent requests from Aliana's family, Cuyahoga County finally demolished the abandoned property where Aliana was discovered. This act held significant emotional weight for her loved ones, as it symbolized closure and the removal of a painful reminder. In 2019, Aliana's family filed a lawsuit against the school she attended, the city of Cleveland, and various other parties, including the owner of the abandoned property where their daughter was found. They alleged that the school failed to notify them of Aliana's absence, leading to a delay in discovering her tragic fate. That same year, Governor Kasich signed the Aliana Alert Bill into law, mandating Ohio schools to promptly inform parents within 120 minutes of their child's absence, unless notified otherwise. This legislation came into effect in April 2019. In 2022, Aliana's family received a $1 million settlement as a result of their lawsuit filed in 2019. This financial compensation provided some measure of justice and support for the family in their ongoing healing process. Following Aliana's murder, her parents established a non-profit organization in her honor, ensuring that her memory would live on and contribute to positive change. The organization supports the elimination of vacant houses and the provision of school buses for children's transportation to and from school, among other important causes. Despite enduring an unimaginable tragedy, Aliana's family has transformed their sorrow into a meaningful mission, advocating for children who share similar experiences as their daughter.